you should be able to see Ken Blackmore here.
Yep.
Right.
Along with David Judge,
Ian
Yeah.
Steve.
Oh,
Ian
Ian
Steve,
Steve,
John
John
Lavin,
McCarthy,
McCarthy, Mark
Michael Varian,
Ian Steve.
John Lavin,
Alex Finlater,
What year was that? 58, bloody hell.
58.
Yeah.
Ian Steep in the centre.
17.
Marcus Webb's there too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mark
yeah.
Webb.
But tell me, Andrew,
brother.
Andrew,
Michael Varian.
is there an Englishman in that lot?
Yes, I think there are. But
Very true.
Richard Byrne. Is that Richard Byrne?
Yep.
Mauritius Cup, jeepers.
so I'm going to knock off that picture. I have another one of Ken taken at one of the luncheons many years later. But we'll let Stewart get going.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well, my hero was Ken Blackmore. Ken played for Ireland at right half from 1954 to 1967, winning a total of 43 caps. That was a record at that time. He captained the Irish team 9 times, and he was captain for my first cap in 1966. And for me, that was a dream come true. Ken was a teacher, and we first met when he joined the staff of Sandford Park School, where I was a pupil. He coached the school senior team for my final 2 years at Sandford Park, and we won the Leinster School Senior Cup my last year in school. Ken played for Dublin YMCA for most of his career, apart from the time when as a student he played for Dublin University. You've just seen one of the photographs. From watching him train, I learned the importance of pushing yourself very hard in physical training and of endlessly practicing the basic skills of the game. Because of Ken, I joined Dublin YMCA in my last year in school and played for them for 3 seasons before moving on to play for Dublin University. Ken was an inspirational leader, and he always emphasized the importance of doing simple things really well, such as stopping the ball dead, passing quickly and accurately, and dribbling only when necessary. In my time with YMCA, he played as a free-running centre midfield playmaker. Excuse me. And this was my first experience of a departure from the traditional 2-3-5 formation. He was very direct in his team talks. One particular example has remained in my memory. It was half-time in the 1962 Mills Cup final against Three Rock Rovers. We were 3-1 down and things weren't looking good. They had thrashed us in a league match shortly beforehand. At half-time, Ken picked up a few balls and tossed them to Ian Steep and David Roy, our fullbacks, saying something like, "There's no point talking to you two until you can stop and hit the ball better. So go and practice for the rest of half-time." Now, Ian was on the Irish team and David was being close. David was close to being picked for Leinster, but that didn't matter to Ken. He then proceeded to give the rest of us simple instructions on how to improve in the second half. And we won the match. We won the match 4-3 after extra time. On another occasion, a right wing, Peter Carr, hit a long corner from the corner flag at above shoulder height into the side netting and the goals. And Ken's response was, "Don't entertain us with tricks, Carr, just hit the ball out." I also learned from Ken the importance of honestly evaluating my own performance and of identifying weaknesses and ways to improve. Excuse me, something that was also very valuable in my work. Many teachers want to improve the life chances of their pupils. Ken certainly did that for me, and I'll always be grateful. Thank you.
Very good.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
Well
sir.
done.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Noel Quinn, you were going to speak about your brother Reg.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I want to talk about my brother Reg. Reg is 6 years older than me, and he's happily living out in New Zealand, COVID-free New Zealand. 2 reasons why I want to talk about Reg. Number one, he introduced me to hockey when I was about 9 years old, which is quite young in those days. And also he went on to have a distinguished international career.
Have we got him up on the screen?
Yep.
Yes, he is beside
Joe O'Mara.
O'Mara. He's between Joe and Alvin. Back right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I see Stewart there too, and Reggie. Oh, I see a lot of people there I recognise.
Yes.
David Judge. Dan Shanahan.
And,
John Douglas in the
all that.
back row, Terry Gregg beside
Yeah.
Alvin Carson,
Alan
Tollerton.
Tollerton.
Alan Tollerton, yeah.
Reg Tracy,
Reg
Derek
Tracy.
Shaw.
John
Well,
Robinson.
There.
Uh-huh. Anyway, Reg played for Ireland from 1966 to 1972. And 1972 is a key year because that's when I started playing for Ireland and I took over from Reg actually. He achieved 23 caps. His career was cut short because he decided to emigrate to Canada and it all stopped at that point. But to rewind a little bit, Reg introduced me to hockey, as I said, at age 9. He was 6 years ahead of me. He went to Wallace High School and he was influenced by a teacher there called George Henry, who was an excellent coach. But Reg brought me home an old stick one day when I was 9 and we played in literally a field beside our house. And we spent hours and hours and hours stopping, hitting, doing all those basic things, undercutting, all the usual stuff, which put me in a good standing for playing up in Parkview and Doak and all those places later on in my career in the league. So anyway, Reg gave me the stick. We played in bumpy grass. Hitting, stopping was the main thing. So when I went on to grammar school, I hit the ground running quite literally because I had all the basic skills, and he also gave me a great passion for the game. Reg was very passionate about the game and how he played and how other people played as well. So I consider that my relatively successful hockey career was firmly grounded in the skills that Reg gave me. His career took him through schools hockey, the school system at Wallace High School. He then went on to play at Queen's as a medical student, then Lisnagarvey, Ulster, and then played for Ireland from 1966. One of the teams he enjoyed playing for while still at school was Garvey 2As, which was a very formidable team in those days. And he played with greats like Jack Bowden and Stevie Johnson. So for a young fellow of 16 or so, playing with those guys was quite something. He was first captain in 1966, beside a very close friend of his, Jackie Brown, who got several caps for Ireland as well. Reg also had some training camps with GB. His international career ended on a high, actually, in Santander in 1972, where I believe Ireland beat GB to win the tournament. I very much regret not overlapping with Reg at that tournament, but I had sit my finals at Queen's, and I couldn't get it. Just was impossible to do both things at the same time. As I said, Reg took his family off to Canada, and that was the end of his hockey career. In conclusion, he was a very natural, elegant hockey player who always played with his head up, could see what was happening around him. He also had great ability to strike a ball and scored some great goals which goalkeepers never actually saw going past them. And that's my brother Reg.
Thank you very much, Noel. Melvin, would you like to talk about Rick Charlesworth, and after you've spoken, Peter Dewitt, who played for Victoria in Australia, would also add a few words about Rick Charlesworth. But if you'd like to kick off, Melvin.
Yes, thanks, Andrew. In your emails, you used the word hero. I actually see Charlesworth as an icon for me in the sense of shedding light. Now, what could you say about Charlesworth? He was a medical doctor. He was a member of Parliament. He opened the batting for Western Australia. He's now a speaker and a promotional speaker. He writes books, and he's a player par excellence and a coach who has had indescribable success. As a player, he was a fierce competitor. Never give up, never say die attitude, but fair. Fair on the field, fair off the field. And he was also quite forward off the field as well as he was forward on the field. Tremendous courage. In the Montreal Olympics, the semi-final, he played with 16 stitches in his shin, having been cut to the bone in the previous game. Of course, he was, as a player, a leading player of the world at the time and recognized as such. What special attributes might he have had in a physical sense? Well, I used to see him as Mr. Rubber Hips, because he could take the ball from far outside on his left, and put it far outside on his right, drag it in the blink of an eye, and he could drag it the other direction as well. I remember the last game that was played on grass in the national championships in Hobart, and WA was playing against Vic. And as Peter would know, Vic WA games would be a grudge match for a start. And Charlesworth was taking the short corners on the right-hand side of the D. Now, the first two corners, the umpire blew him up. And nobody could see why, because it didn't appear anything wrong. But when the third one came along, just as the guy was going to hit the ball out, Charlesworth stopped him and turned around to the umpire and said, "Please watch carefully." Now, of course, that created considerable mirth in the assembled multitude, and no doubt if a sinkhole the size of Siberia had opened up in front of the umpire, he would have jumped in. Now, the jury would, I think, will forever be out on whether this was a display of arrogance and superiority or just a quirk of personality. But of course, that was the last game that was played on grass. And thereafter, in the championship, that is, and thereafter, we always played an AstroTurf. The surface, of course, transformed the game, aided and abetted by some significant changes in the rules, such as no offside. You can turn 360 with the ball as long as you had it in close control, and you can pass the ball to yourself for a free hit. So the result of all that was to speed the game up enormously. And Australia has always played a very fast game. It's always been, we've been known for it. Transformed my game of playing hockey. I used to play in the center of the field, and I transformed myself into a letterbox player. Receive the ball and get rid of it, quick, smart, usually passing the ball either in a through pass or a square pass, very seldom a diagonal pass. And the whole game was transformed in the sense space was the issue. Create space, make space, find space, and use space. And ironically, make sure that the opposition never had any space. Now, as a coach, Charlesworth was known for being able to advise people as to their history, but that wasn't his style. His style was to work at the shoulder, to help the players come to see ways they could improve, not by being told, by they coming to see ways they could improve and developing strategies and processes and so on to realize those goals, and do so under strong guidance and a requirement for a high standard. So the players discovered not only that, how to play better with other players they were playing with, to bring out the best of themselves, to do the very best that they could do. And of course, then add in Charlesworth's technical nous and innovative technical nous, and you have a powerful cocktail. He won, as you know, 2 Olympics gold medals with women and 1 with the men, and umpteen other world championships with the men. When I look back on the Dublin University, my experience with Dublin University, I'd have to say, the play was astonishing, absolutely indescribable. Probably not at the standard that Charlesworth and his ilk, but we all tried to do our best and to continuously improve. So why do I see Charlesworth as an icon shedding light? One, because he encourages people, and therefore I believe everybody should, do the very best they can do. They could not necessarily the most outstanding best, but the very best that they can do. Secondly, he had this never give up, never say die attitude. And if you look at the world today, resilience and things like that have never been more important. And the third thing is he was an all-sided person. As I pointed out at all the things he's done outside of hockey, he was an all-sided person. I remember in Howth Road Primary School, sitting there as 8 years of age, looking at a huge Mercator projection of the world, crinkled, crackled, worn map. And I said to myself, my goodness, I'm going to get as many experiences as I can and do as much as I can. In that sense of being all-sided, Charlesworth, for me, is an icon. I think, Andrew, before I put my educational hat on any firmer, I should sign off.
Thank you very much.
Well done. Excellent.
Melvin, I'm going to follow you with Peter Dewitt, who I think played against Charlesworth, and then I'm going to ask Terry to talk. And Terry may well have played against Charlesworth as well when he was playing for Great Britain. So you might include that as well as talking about David Judge. So Peter Dewitt, do I have something to share in relation to you? I think I might have, but would you like to kick off, Peter?
Yeah.
I think you played against Charlesworth.
I did, yeah, quite a number of times. Actually, following on from Melvin, who saw him as an icon, I would categorize Charlesworth as Australia's best hockey player all time. I don't think there ever was a better Australian hockey player, and that goes through to the day of today. He was just a fabulous player to play against. And I had the honour of doing that a number of times. Melvin mentioned the Australian Hockey Championships, the state championships. I think it's just worth a couple of words on why that is relevant. You've got to remember that Australia is a very large country, and there are a number of highly populated places, but very few and far between. If you want to go from Brisbane to Perth, if you're playing a hockey match, it's 3,600 kilometers, takes 5 hours flying. Now, in the 70s, when I played, and I think probably in the 60s before then, it was a total amateur game. And I compare that in the 70s to Holland, where I came from, and it wasn't in those days purely amateur game. Money was already going under the table to various players. But in Australia, it was absolutely strictly amateur. So if you wanted to play against another team from another state, you had to get on a plane and book a hotel, etc., at your own costs. So when I played for Victoria, we had to pay for our own costs for the trip, which was a 2-week tournament. And the reason why it was a 2-week tournament was it was the only time when the states actually managed to play against each other. So the only time that you as somebody living in Melbourne could play against somebody in another state. And therefore for the selectors, it was a critical thing because the 2-week tournaments meant that everybody played 7 games, and the selectors could, at the end of that tournament, then, as they always did, announce the next touring team that would travel around the world to go to some sort of tournament. So for players, a very important thing, the Australian State Championships, and that's where I ran into Charlesworth on a number of occasions. He played as an inside right for Western Australia, and I was the inside left for Victoria. And whenever we played them, my brief from the coach was always to make sure that Charlesworth didn't get the ball and couldn't do anything. Well, that was an impossible task. And so I never really looked forward to these matches against Western Australia. I'm not very quick off the mark. I can run all day long, but not too quick off the mark. So Charlesworth was extremely quick off the mark. And I usually spent all day trying to figure out where the hell he was and why he wasn't where he was 5 seconds ago. He was extremely mobile. And I'll talk a little bit about the system that they played in a minute. But so all my admiration to him. You've already heard what he's done. As a coach, he was a different coach than what I was used to. As Melvin said, he encouraged people to figure out where they went wrong themselves with a little bit of help from him. He was never overcritical. I should mention, by the way, as Melvin had mentioned, that Charlesworth had got a serious injury in the semi-final of the Olympics. The actual coach for Victoria at that time that I played was a chap called Des Piper, a plumber by trade, who played in 3 Olympic Games, the last one being '68 in Mexico, where Australia was in the final against Pakistan. I think it was the first time that Australia was ever in a major tournament final, and the Pakistanis, of course, had been there and done that for decades. And they were a pretty rough bunch, and part of their tactics were to figure out who was the key player in the, or a couple of players on the opposing side, and then use the stick as they used to do, and make sure that they got serious injuries. When they went into the final, Australia had a number of injuries, and they only had 12 fit players for the final. And in the first 5 minutes, one of the very tall Pakistani fullback hit Des across his hands as he was holding the stick and broke 2 of his fingers. Considering they only had one sub, who I think was a fullback, what they ended up doing was tying Des's 2 fingers to the stick, and he played the rest of the game like that. Like he acquitted himself well. Tough as nails, and as a coach, he was brutal. And I think it's one of the things that has always stuck with me. I came straight from Trinity to Australia, and I always enjoyed my hockey in Trinity immensely. For me, a rough match was playing against Railway Union, where Joey would sort of hit some fairly hard balls to incoming inside forwards. So that I consider that to be pretty tough hockey until I got to Australia, and then I realised that the Australians go all out all the time and take no prisoners. I sent Andrew a little sheet with the players in Western Australia. The Western Australian team was by far the best state team in the 70s and was led by Charlesworth, and had quite a number of very, very good players. I wanted to mention 2 additional players in addition to Charlesworth himself.
Just briefly, Bud.
Sorry.
Just briefly.
Yeah. Sorry?
Yeah, just briefly.
Yeah, very briefly. Okay. The other 2 players, one was on the sheet, he was the right half in the Western Australians team, a guy called, what was he called? David Bell. Played right half, and Steve Smith was the centre half of South Australia. Those 3 played as a little team within the Australian team. I think it was mentioned that we were used to the 2 at the back, the usual lineup at the front, 5 and 3 in the middle. Well, Western Australia played sort of like total football. It would have Smith at centre half, would suddenly go to the right wing. David Bell scored a lot of goals by just coming through, and Charlesworth would fall back, and it was very difficult to play against, and none of it had been used to it. And I think that was probably my lasting memory of playing against Western Australia. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Peter.
Terry, do you wish to add a word about Charlesworth, and then you might be kind enough to move on to speak about David?
Well, I played against Charlesworth mostly for Great Britain. And my last memory of him, he was a most unpleasant and difficult person to play against. He didn't think twice about taking your ankles out. So I admired him as a great player. I didn't admire him as a person. My lasting memory will be we got to the semi-final in the Champions Trophy in Perth in 1979. And we were 1-0 with 10 minutes to go, and we got a penalty stroke against Australia, they were a better team than us by far. And I took the stroke and hit Green. I think Green was the name of the goalkeeper, if you all remember, in the teeth, smashed all his teeth. And he saved the stroke, and we didn't make the final. That's my memory. And as I ran back to the halfway line, Charlesworth put his chin right up against me and he said, "That's justice." So I don't remember him as a very friendly, nice person, but I met him later when he was coaching, because he coached the Australian women when I was coaching the Irish women. And I think we became much more friendly at that stage in our life.
And did you fix his teeth for free?
The funny thing was I didn't know his teeth were broken at the time because he didn't wear helmets. I didn't even know that happened. All I knew was I'd missed a stroke.
Yeah, heartbreaking for you,
It
Terry.
was much more important, you know. So that's my memory of Rick, and he was undoubtedly a fantastic player and a fantastic coach. But I'm really here to talk about David, which is much more important. And first of all, can I just say welcome to Grania and Wendy. I'm really delighted to see you. It's lovely to see you, and I will come back to you as I speak because I'm not going to attempt to recite David's CV. I don't know how you meant to recite a CV that lasted 17 years playing for Ireland. Rather, I'm going to start about 1970 because at that stage, David was in his 30s. He was captain of the Irish team, I think, certainly part of that time. And if you remember, that was the first time there was a European Cup and the first time that Ireland had ever taken part in what you might call a major tournament. Prior to that, we played single games. And I can remember flying to Wales for my first cap, playing Wales and coming home the same night. And all of a sudden, George Glasgow was appointed to get a 16-man squad together to play in a big tournament. And my memory of that, especially with David, was that Alan Tullerton and I came in as the two new young forwards because Derek Hennessy had been the great centre forward, if you remember. And we came in as two young, weak 19-year-olds who really weren't all that good and certainly inexperienced. And David welcomed us. Harry Cahill and David were the only two people who had ever played in what you might call a major tournament before because they had played in the Olympics, both 64 and 68. Well, David played in 64, I think, in Tokyo, which is, I think, is correct. And my memory was that David welcomed me so much. You know, he knew we were young, he knew we weren't great, but he encouraged us all the time. The converse of that, funny enough, was Harry Cahill because Alan and I were practicing shooting in from the edge of the circle. And Harry was kicking a ball out over our head faster than we were hitting it, just to demonstrate that we really were the greenhorns in the squad. So I remember that. But that time was a very exciting time because it was a new hockey. It was a squad getting ready for a tournament. And we had training weekends in Dublin. And that's when I really met David and Grania. And David, as a great captain, person that he was, when we were down in Dublin, certainly one particular weekend, he would have everyone round to Rocklands. And we were all sitting in Grania's kitchen. She'd fed us, no doubt. And we're all chatting away. Last training weekend, about to go to Brussels and play Spain in the first game. And someone said, you know, Spain, good team, you know, they're really a lot better than us on paper. And Joey O'Mara said, it's a good job we're playing them on grass then. I always remember that joke in David's kitchen. And from that time on, obviously training weekends came on a lot. And I spent a lot of time coming down to Dublin. I stayed with Grania on a number of occasions at Rocklands. And I stayed also in Abilene, in the Findlater's house in Abilene in South Dublin. And I was greeted with nothing but kindness. And my greatest memories are obviously the hockey itself, but playing hockey in the back garden. Grania, you may remember, Wendy will remember, I played hockey with the kids in the back garden with David. And our level of enthusiasm on any surface at any time was fantastic. And those are my fondest memories of that. And as time went by, then I think I became captain in 74, something like that. And David graciously treated me with such kindness and respect because I was this young brat coming in to be captain over him, who was the senior player. And he treated me so well. And I always really remember him for that. And the times that follow when he was always there to give me advice when I wanted it. And again, I'll come back to, we eventually got to the World Cup, as you know. David played in that qualifying tournament. And when we got there, he was 42 years old. I think, Grania, correct me if I'm wrong. He was 42 years old. He played for 17 years. And I think he still is the oldest player ever to play in a Hockey World Cup. Would anyone disagree, Stewart?
No, I think you're right.
I think he was. I don't think anyone will ever play to that age and to play as well. And remember also that he came from an era of fullbacks, centre halves, and he moved into an era of sweepers and 1-4-2-3, offside traps, and he did it all. I mean, how many people could actually do that, to change your game and move on through that. And the only thing he didn't do was play on AstroTurf eventually at top level. And he did the lot. And I can remember, stop me if I'm going on too long, it's hard with David, you could go on for a very long time. I remember a training weekend at Queen's University on the gravel pitches. And David's enthusiasm, at this stage he must have been nearly the end of his career, taking me out at lunchtime, went out before everybody else had finished their lunch, just so that he could practice his golf shot hitting out long corners on the gravel pit for me to stop him. And I just think, how many people were that good? How many people could be that good? So I just want to say that 17 years, 100 caps, perfect gentleman in almost every way. As far as I'm concerned, he can never be equaled in Irish hockey history. Just not possible. And I just think his temperament, the way he played, the example he set for all of us, I wish I'd followed him better than I did. I wish I'd been as good a sportsman as he was. And I'm just so glad that I played in his time and in his era. And I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to speak about him, and especially to do it in front of Grania and Wendy, because I unfortunately was in London and I wasn't able to make David's funeral. So I would like to end there if I may.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Terry.
I'm going to ask Percy Henchy to speak next about Paddy Neville, and then John McKechnie about Jim Good, and then Frank Young about Dixon. Just to give you a little bit of the batting order. I'm also recording this because there's quite a lot of people who wanted to be on this Zoom. I mean, Derek Shaw was going to speak about Stevie Johnson, but in the end, he wasn't able to join us. And Stephen Finlater said to me, as well as recording it, what would you think about putting it up on YouTube? Because he said, this is a historic meeting. And things are being said today that may never be said on the same occasion by the same sorts of people. And so I'm wondering, would you be happy if this does go up on YouTube? Obviously not as a commercial item, simply for anybody who happens to want to watch it.
Yes.
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 No problem, Andy.
No problem.
Right, good.
Are you
Well,
happy?
So no four-letter words from now on, apart from good and well.
Were there any?
No, there weren't, Terry.
Thank you.
You can be the judge of that, Terry.
Yeah, I'm worried about that.
So who did I say was next?
Percy.
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 Right, Percy. I think we have a share for Paddy Neville.
Okay.
Isn't that the Portland
Thanks,
Hockey Club? Am I sharing that?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, I beg your pardon. Right. Is this the Portland Hockey Club?
Yeah. It's just I couldn't get too many photographs of Paddy, but he's there in the back row. 1, 2, 3, 4 from the left.
Yes, there he is. Yeah.
That was a Portland team in the 40s and 50s and won all around and had an exceptionally good side. And of course, he was the main man. That's 42, 43. Okay, Andrew.
Yes, so he was your hero. Away you go, Percy.
Yeah, well, I'd start by, I grew up in the environs of St. Edith's. We were called St. Edith's as well to keep the health authorities happy. That was the name of the hospital. But it was always known as Portland Hockey Club. And it was a very strong area for sport because of the huge staff. And there was senior teams there in hurling, football and hockey. And there was a handball alley. And as a young fella growing up, I remember Paddy Neville, who was born not too far from where I was born myself on the hospital grounds in Portland, but he would have been a good few years older than me. And Paddy used to spend endless hours in the handball alley, sometimes on his own. And that's how he trained and that's how he kept himself fit. He says, you can run all the laps in the park and all your sprints you like. The best way to get fit is in the handball alley, right, left foot. I used to hit a hurling ball back from a very good senior hurling team from the behind the goals. And Paddy and another man by the name of Tommy Bourne came over to me that one evening. and asked me would I like to play hockey. And of course I said I would. And they gave me a hockey stick, and I was only about 12 or 13 years of age. And I played in a Mills Cup final at 14 against a Tree Rock Rovers team that were about to take over everything in Leinster hockey for a long number of years. They beat us 4-2 in the Mills Cup final in St. James's Gate, which had a great grass pitch then. But my lasting memory of Paddy was when, like, we took up hockey just like I did. Paddy would have been the same. It wasn't played in our schools, so we just took it up. And I always remember him with, you know, I was in awe of players like John Lavin, Dan Shanahan, Jerry Lonergan, Mick Murdoch, right wingers like that who were extremely strong. I was a left half. And I remember Paddy saying to me, you don't have to worry about that, Percy. Indeed, it was Paddy who put Percy on me as against Pat. He always called me Percy because he worked with my father. And Paddy said, the only thing you need worry about, the John Lavins and these right wingers, is you stop the ball going to them. And he showed me how to take up positions and advised me when I wasn't playing, and if I had ever had time and were in town, to watch YMCA playing and to look at halfbacks, but especially somebody like Pat Haid. And I duly done that, and I would watch Pat and indeed Pat was probably, in my opinion, one of the best hockey players I've ever played with or against. Played into pro with him. I didn't make it at international level, probably because of him. He was an exceptional left half, because I did make it at underage level up to under 23. He taught me the basics of stopping the ball, and the most important, how important it was, your feet, I remember, and your head. You had a good eye, your stick. He showed me how to tackle. Don't ever tackle from behind. And them days you could only tackle on the reverse when a right winger went by it. That's if he did pick up the ball. And never tackle him face on, but go side by side with him and then wait for your opportunity on a bumpy pitch to whip the ball away. In them days too, there was throw-ins. He showed me how to work up the field. Don't throw it across the field in your old half. Basic, simple stuff. He showed me a cricket grip where the ball would go off the defender's stick and go back out, and you made progress up the left wing. And when you get up that far, you stopped throwing the ball anymore. You either dropped it and he would move on to it, or somebody else, or roll it up in and make sure it's on a player's, the right half's reverse. Little things like that. And I really loved the game. He was a tremendous player, like everybody that's here tonight. Those who are my vintage would remember him as probably the greatest all-rounder Ireland ever produced. He played international hockey. He played international cricket. He played interleague football, a professional footballer with Drumcondra, and he played senior Gaelic football with Dublin. He was on the Irish Triple Crown team that won the Triple Crown, I think it was sometime in the late 40s. He was a centre forward, scored regularly, and he was banned from playing hockey. It wasn't that he was good enough. He was stopped being picked for the international team because of his professional status when he played football with Drumcondra, who were a League of Ireland club at the time then, and he was a reserve international goalkeeper for a long time as well, and didn't make it. In them days, the substitutes didn't come on. He played international cricket as well, and another reason he was, and then he had no problem with the cricket. He played and topped the score seemingly for years and years, but then he was an exceptionally good Gaelic footballer. And there was a ban in then if you were playing foreign games. If you played Gaelic or hurling, well, then you were gone. So that ended his Gaelic career. But he continued to play hockey right up into his 40s. He was a tremendous player, and as I said, he was always remembered. They played Dublin University in a final in the 50s. He scored a goal that went through the side netting. He went over to Reverton Crawford and he told him, Reverton, that's not a goal that went through the side netting. The score was 0-0 at the time. Portran went on to win 4-0. That's the start of the person Paddy was. And I remember there was another umpire, Bobby Bailey. And Bobby was an exceptionally good umpire, in my opinion. And he said, you always knew you made a mistake or you got something wrong with the way Paddy Neville looked at you. He never queried your decision. He never criticised your decision. He just looked at you. He was one too that taught me how to play the offside. As a left half, I could see right across the field, and it was my job to move players up, get them out of the circle, get them up beyond the 25. In them days, we played the offside, which was one way of stopping. We were always a very, very good side defensively. and it was left to Paddy more so in forwards to score goals and win the corners, from which he was deadly with. He would reckon he himself, and I think it was Ralph Walker, and Paddy's greatest ambition, one of his ambitions and one of his regrets, was that he never won the Irish Senior Cup. And whereas he won Mills Cups and leagues and went through seasons unbeaten at home in Portrane for a number of years on the grass pitch, I don't think anybody, it was a foreigner really in them days to play in Portrane, and probably from our perspective, it was a foreign for us to play in Monkstown. Most of the hockey was Dublin 4. But Paddy would, I lost my train of thought there in terms of, no, it doesn't really matter.
You mentioned Ralph Walker.
Oh, Ralph Walker, yeah. Oh, yeah, thanks a million, yeah. In all those years, and I remember well myself, I played against an exceptionally good YMCA side, which consisted of players like Ken Blackmore, as mentioned, Willie Welsh, who went to Tree Rock Rovers afterwards, David Roy, I think there was a fellow by the name of Curtis, Pat Haid, of course, and of course Ralph Walker. And YMCA in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and even in my time playing after that, we could never, and I've never beaten them in the Irish Senior Cup. We could never actually beat them in the Irish Senior Cup. And in one year we had them in the semi-final on both occasions. I remember it well. I'm finishing this. Paddy was playing, and Ralph Walker was still playing with YMCA. And it was an Irish Senior Cup semi-final in Portrane, and the year the YMCA won it. And on 3 occasions, or 2 or 3, I'm not sure, the YMCA beat Portrane in the then Leinster final. It was not an open draw. It was YMCA who went on to win the cup. And that particular game, 5-3, we were winning 3-1. Ralph decided to take the game at the scruff of the neck and banged in 2 or 3 goals. We ended up losing 5-3. And the same year, they beat us 2-0 in the Mills Cup semi-final, again in Portrane, where you could not beat us, but they could. And our good friend Stewart McNulty left the arena that day with a broken nose. And they played with 10 men, and we still managed to lose 2-0. I spoke to Stewart last year about that incident. I think he would be recognised probably as the greatest sportsman Ireland ever produced. And certainly the likes of Dixon Rose and people like that who would have remembered him and read a lot about him, or knew people in the north like George McElroy and people like that, would probably agree with that. He was an exceptional player. He was an absolute gentleman, known as the gentle giant. He played well into his 40s. And alas, died quite suddenly, I remember, in 1977. There was a paper strike. There was very little about his death. He died quite suddenly of a heart attack. So I think that fairly covers
Thank you very much,
the effect
Percy.
it had on me and the type of person that Paddy Neville was.
Well done, Percy. So, didn't I say John McKechnie would talk about Jim Good, and then Frank would talk about Dixon Rose?
Can I ask a question about the speaker just now has been talking about Paddy Neville.
Yes.
Did he ever play for Limerick LPYMA?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Right, John.
Hi. Well, at the introduction of your email, it said you have 3 minutes, and you write about.
His memories seem to be very good, so I will give you a few more minutes.
You'd write,
3 minutes. That's a record.
and you'd write about how someone that influenced you. The person I'm going to talk about, there's a book in it for the amount of work and quality of his play on and off the pitch. So my talk is very much limited to how this person influenced my particular hockey career rather than his career in general through hockey. So please bear that in mind. I finished my hockey career here in Limerick. I don't know if many people know that. And 2 memories I have. One is Stuart Lilburn introduced me to the club, who was a great international player. And the other thing was Stan DeLacy came along and watched our matches. So that was interesting. I was lucky to have played with, this is an LPYMA and Catholic Institute, Eddie Cummins, Hugh Lilburn, Cameron Sterrett, Gordon Milne and the like. But I want to take you back to 1970 when I was doing a gap year after school, and I joined Cork Church of Ireland. I wondered where the hockey scene was, and someone says you must come up to training. So I walked into a very small changing room, CI changing room on the Glashing Road, and I was immediately surrounded by legends. I was feeling very nervous. and 3 successive Senior Cup medal winners in 1967, 1968, and 1969. I mean, the people that were changing or togging out for training were the likes of Reggie Tracy, Georgie Tracy, Freddie Tracy, Willie Nagel, Stan Fuller, Barn Crichton, and of course, Jim Good, who's now on the screen in front of you. It was Jim Good who welcomed me in, of course, and from that day, he started me on a great hockey journey. Jim was an exceptional hockey player himself. I always remember him on the pitch as centre half with a headband on, and he was working and playing. And he has many representative honours. And those who know him, he led by example. He drove himself through fitness training and expected you to do the same, or you got a hell of a roar to mind you to keep going. Jim is an excellent and fully qualified coach. And I remember going into the Gregg Hall one evening for a whiteboard and a film show of drills, square and through passes. And one line I really stuck in my mind, he said, on average, in a hockey match, a player only gets about 12 or 13 touches of the ball. So he says you have to be very skillful when you're on the ball. It's a bit different now with the modern pitches. That first year I played for CI Seconds, which were runner-up in the Irish Senior Cup. Jim later picked me into the Munster Under-22 squad, where I progressed to the Irish Under-22, and there Ray Canton was in charge. Jim then coached and picked me into the Munster squad. He took us to inter-pro weekends where we learned to celebrate our wins, and if there was a poor performance, he showed us how to pick ourselves up and progress. Off the field, Jim was also a huge contributor, a leader, and he was behind the very forward-looking and monstrous move from Glashing Road and the sale of Gregg Hall to create the current very successful Gary Duff Sports Centre. He was also one of the founder members of the Senior Band and Hockey Club. Jim was also involved in my final push into the Irish team. In 1978, the Irish panel was on a training weekend in Cork. And at the end of the weekend, there was a game for the current team v a CI representative team managed by Jim Good. Before the game, Jim Good grabbed me by the elbow and said that the only way you'll get into this team is as right half. So you play at right half today and play like you never played before. Well, 6 months later, I got my first senior cap in the Intercontinental Cup in Hanover at right half. I was playing with the likes then of Johnny Cole, Frankie McGladrey, Stuart Walker, Johnny Clark, Philip Anderson. Jim, I thank you and I salute you. You're an icon in Munster rugby and you had a huge influence on my hockey career. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John.
Well, John.
Andy, do you mind if I tell a quick story about Jim Good, which is quite amusing? I first met him when Ulster were playing Munster. I was standing in the circle waiting for us to take a free hit into the circle, and I suddenly found I just couldn't move my stick. I was just absolutely stuck steady. And I looked down, and Jim Good, who was a giant of a man, had held the stick between my two hands and held it exactly stiff. And I looked at him and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Terry, take it, boy." That was it. That was my introduction. It's just hilarious. I thought he was great.
Well, you would have wanted to be very fit.
That's what I'm going with, Terry.
Right, so Frank Young and Dixon is your hero.
Yes, indeed. Can I share my screen?
Yes. Let me go into that, see that I've got multiple screen on. Yeah. Okay.
It's okay, it's a non-portrait, so you can see.
Yeah. All right, you can. I've got multiple share now on.
Muted it. Frank is muted.
Yeah.
Oh, what am I on now? All right.
That's not it.
Start.
Yeah.
Unmute.
Where's Frank?
Is that better?
Yeah, well, he's appeared. When you speak, you appear, yeah.
Yeah, but Frank,
Okay.
what we've got on the screen is nothing to do with Dixon. It's
No.
something to
I don't know
do.
where that came from. It's certainly not mine. Must be from your computer, Andrew.
Yeah, I'll stop that.
Anyway,
Stop struggling, Andy.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Can I
Go for it, Frank.
go for it? Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I was rather taken aback when Andrew asked me to say a few words about my hockey hero, because I had great difficulty responding straight away. I had to spend rather a long time thinking about it, about 5 seconds or so, because it was only ever one name that could possibly emerge, and that was a Dixon. I first got to know Dixon when I started to play senior hockey for Queens back in the mid-1960s, playing against Cliftonville then, which was one of the top teams in Ulster, which had various league titles and so on to its credit. And here was this Ulster and Ireland player, Dickie Rose, about whom I had heard so much. He'd been playing for Cliftonville since the 1950s. He was competitive, he was gritty, he was tough. He never gave up, he never kept quiet, he was awkward, and he was difficult to play against. And he had the nastiest habit of trickling short corners in at either of our posts in those days. However, 3 years later, I was the newly installed fullback at Cliftonville, playing behind this doyen of Ulster hockey. Dixon's competitive nature was very clear at that stage, because he was very firm about what he wanted people to do, particularly defenders. And I remember one day playing on the grass at the old Cliftonville ground, and Dixon had been giving me horrendous stick throughout the first part of the match for not getting the ball away from the 16-yard hits. And I remember thinking, this one's for you, Dixon. And I undercut one out about knee height, like an absolute rocket. And it went past him like a bolt of lightning. And he turned around and he said, "That's what I've been trying to get you to do all match," which was very just typical of his competitive nature. But Dixon, as a player, was highly competitive and had been a major influence in the success of the Cliftonville team in the 1960s, while also playing senior cricket and some representative cricket in the off-season. But it soon became apparent that he was so much more than a very effective centre-half for Cliftonville, Ulster and Ireland. He was a club secretary, and that involved managing the groundsman, the bar, all the fixtures and many other things, and quite apart from his administrative involvement with the Ulster branch, which extended over 50 years, and where he chaired the development committee, the Ulster selectors. He also coached Ulster and was president in 1979-80. Dixon was also a member of the Irish Hockey Union executive for almost 30 years, president of the Irish Hockey Union once in 1985, and then in the Irish Association in 2006. He chaired the Irish Hockey Centenary Committee, the Irish Selectors, the IHU Development Committee, chaired the Nations Cup Organising Committee for the 1995 Euros, chaired the Organising Committee of Euros 2002, and he was a member of the Management Committee and Council of the merged Irish Hockey Association from 2000. Plus, during all of this, he was a member of the Northern Cricket Union Executive, and also was president of the Irish Cricket Union in 1984, and the list goes on and on. But the examples I've just given illustrate just how big the playing, administration and organisational contribution Dixon has made to hockey on this island. He's the supreme example of voluntary effort and service to sport in all its many facets. His leadership, enthusiasm, commitment, clear thinking and attention to detail made him a key force in driving the development of hockey in Ireland. No job was too big or too small. He could move seamlessly from being the head of a national sports governing body to dealing with a Cliftonville 4th 11 fixtures problem, and he also prepared the wicket for Estonians Cricket Club every week for many, many years. And indeed, few of us here will probably forget the sight, or will ever forget the sight of the chairman of the organising committee of Euro 1995, with his hosepipe in one hand, his trusty assistant Michael Graham helping him, watering the pitch at half-time during the 1995 Euros at UCD. I have been privileged to play and work with Dixon over more than 50 years, and to see just how much one person could contribute to a sport, all done on a purely voluntary basis. And during all that time, I've been very fortunate to be able to call him a friend, except for one day when my under-23 team beat the Ulster senior team in a warm-up match, and then Dixon didn't speak to me for over a week thereafter. But Dixon, you are my hockey hero.
Good.
Very good.
Excellent.
Well done, Frank.
Hello, Francis.
Well done, Bronk.
Thank you very much, Frank. Dixon, do you need to telephone your solicitor or not?
I didn't recognise myself in all that, but I'd like to thank Frank for being so thorough in his investigations, and also like to thank everybody who I can see, because it's great to see some of the old faces from when hockey was hockey, and we didn't have all this sort of strange, don't have a pint in the bar the same way we used to, and things like that. So it's lovely to see everybody tonight. And
We'll have a glass of this.
yes, I'm very grateful to
Dixon, what he missed out one little story, Dixon, there, which he wouldn't know about. When I was 16, I was at a schoolboy coaching course at Orangefield.
Yes.
And we got this chap, Dixon Rose, who I didn't know was teaching me a few things. I was selected for the team to play the staff at the end of it. And on the way through, I dribbled past Dixon and scored. And on the way back, he said, "Son, that was stick obstruction." And I said, "I know, you taught me that earlier." And thank you, Dixon. Without you showing me the illegal bits, I probably wouldn't have scored against you that day.
Very good.
Well, you can chat among yourselves, because I've got to bring up the last speaker, who's Hugh Fitszimons, and he's talking about a Pembroke Wanderers player called Bennie Atkinson. So it'll take me a moment just to bring him up. So do chat among yourselves, if that's all right.
Could I mention a legend in hockey that his achievements haven't been adequately recognised? Can I?
Yes, carry on.
Yeah. Okay. When I joined Milan in 1959, we had no heroes at that time because we languished in the nether regions of the senior league. Our heroes didn't come until later, when Stephen Butler and Graham Shaw came along. And but towards the end of my 25 years in the senior league, Ray O'Connor, I started to play as a young lad. But Ray's achievements have never been adequately recognised. He umpired 2 Olympic finals, 2 World Cup finals, 5 Champion Trophy finals, 12 European Cup finals, 11 Irish Senior Cup finals, and was the overall umpire in the Beijing and London Olympics. And this is an achievement that no other Irishman has ever achieved. And I think he should be adequately recognised for all of that great achievement.
Here.
Yep. Outstanding.
David McConnell.
Well, indeed, Andrew, as I think I said to you, I don't know really why I'm here. I feel like a minnow among the salmons. All of you, or most of you anyway, seem to have played hockey at such high levels. But I'm here to say a few words on behalf of my oldest friend, Declan Budd, who some of you will know well.
Yes.
And Declan has...
the judge.
Judge, yes, indeed, judge at the High Court. His father was a judge at the Supreme Court. But Declan a wonderful hockey player in Trinity and then at Rovers. And unfortunately, Declan had a bit of an accident in, I think, July or early August, and he broke some ribs. And he then went into hospital, of course, and then in the Royal Hospital in Donnybrook, where he's convalescing. Now, Andrew, you've cut down my screen. I don't know. I think I want to.
Well, I have a picture of the three people that you're going to speak about, Hennessy and Fitszimons. And well, we've had Lavin up already with Ken Blackmore.
Well, that's an incredible bunch of people, isn't it?
Well,
Richie Mellon.
Yeah, there's Richard
and Harry Cahill and Wally Mercer and Stewart.
Yeah, there's Richard and Stewart, who are the two finest hockey players that come out of Sanford Park.
Yeah,
and they're on the same team for so many years.
And David Judge is in that photo too, and Tony McMillan.
Yes, and Derek Hennessy. My goodness, fantastic photograph.
Yeah.
Now,
well, I'll take the photo off now, David, and then people will be able to listen to you without getting distracted.
So Declan and I are oldest friends. We met when we were 7 years of age, and we've been close friends ever since. And those of you who know him will understand he was a really, really special man, and is indeed. So he wanted to speak tonight about, I think, mainly about Dick Fitszimons, but also some of the others. And he started, he can't because he's in hospital. So Andrew asked me would I speak these words on his behalf, and I'm delighted to do it. So he came up with this report from TTD, a college miscellany. That was one of the Trinity magazines in the 50s. This is 9th of November, 1956. And I'm quoting, "One wonders how forceful this line would be without Fitszimons. What a handsome player. What a handsome player he is. Always most graceful. The stick in his hands becomes a wand of majesty. And the ball seems to have no option but to obey him. His resources of strength are inexhaustible. When the peak of achievement seems to have been reached, there is suddenly a twist or a turn, and he is away again, coaxing and wheeling the ball along with him. He is its master through seduction, never through violence." Dublin University 4, Corinthians 1. I remember watching Dick and thinking, yes, what an elegant, elegant player he was. And the reporter for TCD Miscellany in 1956 got it all the way. Now, Declan played with Dick, and here are Declan's own memories. And I'm quoting from what Declan has written. "Richard Fitszimons never telegraphed a pass. He would know that I had got into an unmarked position on the left wing for Three Rock Rovers and pass me the ball, which I would then centre to Derek Hennessy. When John Lavin received the ball on the right wing and got past the opposing left half, he was never caught. He would centre the ball at the 25-yard line at a blistering speed for Hennessy to burst onto. If the goalie managed to save his shot, then I, that is Declan Budd, would hope to get the rebound off his pads and put the ball into the back of the net. I had huge admiration for the skills and talents of Lavin and Hennessy and Fitszimons. Now you have to think, this is now me reminiscing a little bit or wondering about it. Here was Declan, much younger than any of those, and he was in this incredible forward line of Rovers. And some of you might remember, but I was racking my brains and trying to think, who was the fifth person in that forward line? Declan on the left wing.
Bill Horton.
Bill Horton.
I thought probably Bill. Was Bill playing left
inside?
Inside left.
Bill was inside left. And there was a George McCaw around as well.
Yes, he would have been. absolutely fantastic front line. And I was, as Andrew knows very well, I was a journeyman in hockey, and I used to occasionally see these wonderful players playing either, well, for Rovers in those days. And it was just such a lesson and such a wondrous thing to watch. Fantastic people. And I'd like to, if I may, take a little time on the side, Andrew, to say that I mentioned earlier before we really got into it, there was one particular family which played an incredible role in Irish hockey, at least in the South, and that was the Dagg family. And the story starts with a man called Sidney Dagg. Some of you will remember him by name, but he had a huge influence. He was an international, but a huge influence in the administration of hockey all through the 20s, 30s, 40s, into the 50s. And then his two nephews, Noel Dagg and Trevor Dagg, were both internationals as well. And I mentioned it briefly to Stewart and to Melvin, they'll both remember it well, that when Trevor Dagg became the headmaster of Sanford Park, he forced the board to introduce hockey into a rugby school, even though it was a very small school and so on. But the board was entirely devoted to rugby. There were no other games except rugby. And Trevor brought hockey into Sanford. And then something very special happened for Stewart. And that was that because Trevor was headmaster of Sanford and had started hockey in Sanford, Ken Blackmore came as a junior teacher to Sanford Park. And of course, he then took over the coaching of the hockey team and coached Melvin and Stewart. I was not as susceptible to coaching as Stewart. And I'll remember one thing forever, Stewart. On cold afternoons in the winter, and there was no training, no sports on in the afternoon, and I can remember you, Stewart, going up and down the muddy, wet, miserable pitch. From one end of the pitch to the other, there was nobody else on the pitch, nobody else. And you were just knocking the ball left to right, left to right, left to right, as you said earlier, doing the simple things well. And of course, Ken was your mentor, and the Irish hockey team and hockey clubs, indeed, in both North and South, were really, really indebted to you. So, but I just want to say that if Trevor Dagg had not become headmaster of Sanford, there would have been no Ken Blackmore, no Richard Mellon, no Melvin Freestone, no Vincent. I'm trying to remember Melvin, his first name, Vincent.
Oh, David.
David,
an Irishman who went to England and became one of the most important coaches in English hockey, I guess in the 70s and 80s.
Yep.
So many other people. So the hockey tradition was extended by the Daggs, in particular by Trevor Dagg at Sanford Park. So I'm speaking on behalf of Declan. I wish he were here to speak on his own behalf. I'm going to finally, I'll finish. It's lovely that I think Wendy Judge, maybe Grania, is here. David Judge actually did play on AstroTurf.
Did he?
But he was a veteran. By this time, he was probably in his late 60s. I was in my late 50s, maybe early 60s, and I was playing for the veterans. And David did something which I resented on the day. He tried to coach me. I was nearly 60. He was nearly 70. And he felt still that he had something to give, and he wanted to coach me to be a better member of the Three Rock Rovers veterans. Later, a few years later, he gave me something I still have, Grania, I still have, wonderful agapanthus plants, which he used to grow in his wonderful garden on Killiney Hill. So hockey's meant a lot to me, even though I was only a journeyman. Thank you all.
Well,
Could I
thank you
add-
very much, David.
Could I add one thing about Sidney Dagg? He actually wrote the first hockey book about Irish hockey.
Yes.
Which went through from 1896 or 1893 right through to the start of the Second World War, which is it's a collector's item, that book now. TSC
I have a
Dagg.
copy of it.
Yeah, TSC Dagg, yes, I do.
Could I say a little bit about Sydney Dagg?
Hold on, I'm not sure if Dixon has finished.
No, I have finished. I was
Yeah,
just saying that was another thing about the Dags, and it was regarding Irish hockey. He had produced this book, which was a very great record of Irish hockey.
Yeah, thank you, Dixon. Now, John.
I was lucky enough to be brought along by my parents when I was a 10-year-old and onwards to London Bridge Road to sit in the old rickety stand. Sat beside Sydney Dagg, who was then a very elderly man coming along in his wheelchair. And we sat beside also the reporter from the Evening Mail or something who wrote his reports on Bronco Lou paper and rushed off at 4 o'clock to have them to have it in the late edition. But it was a wonderful time to watch that Three Rock team, and I'm probably one of the few people who watched those games in 1960 to 63 with the Judge, Fitszimons, Lavin, Willie
Yes.
Walsh, a great centre half,
Yeah.
Bill Horton, and Hennessy, just his wrists and his just a little bit of footwork, and then his wrists, and it was in the back of the net off his back foot. Wonderful to see all those games on that sort of well-road, muddy pitch, London Bridge Road. But Sydney Dagg also kept a record of the touring team, the Buccaneers, who I'm still the secretary of, even though we haven't toured for 20 years. He kept...
You've been slacking on the job, John.
Beautiful 2 volumes. It started in 1904, and it's a picture of the team every year up until 1978. Well, he just looked after it from the first 50 years. Leather bound with the picture of the team, the names of the say Folkestone, the names of the players and their positions, a match report, who the opposition were, and for every single game up to sort of game 200, 50 years later. And I'm lucky enough to have these 2 leather-bound volumes, which will in due course go to Peter Agnew and the
archives,
the hockey archive in the library in Dublin. But it was a pleasure to sit beside him back then. And then 10 years later, I was actually through Trinity and playing with the tail end of that great team. And I remember, John Lavin's passes were immaculate on the 25. They just sizzled in flat, so easy to stop from right wing into the centre of the circle. And then Richard Fitszimons eventually hung up his stick. But I remember saying to him, I owed him he'd given me 1,000 more good passes than I'd given him. And David Judge, wonderful to play in the left wing with him, because he'd tell me just to run in an arc from the 25 in a curve towards the center of the circle. And he'd choose the time to hit the free out from the circle so to split wherever the defense was. And it was so easy. You were through with one magic pass timed as you ran in this arc. Those are my memories.
Wasn't the gate named for Sydney Dagg?
Yes.
Yes.
The gate of Three Rock.
I think is it still there?
No, I haven't.
It's still there. It's over one of the outhouse buildings there. I've actually got the architect's design for the Sydney Dagg. What was given to the blacksmith to make that sign.
To make it, yeah.
I have it in my archive.
Good.
David, could I backtrack with one quiet comment about Trevor Burke Dagg? If I may, I would. Sorry.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. For me, he had an aura that instinctively encouraged you to bring out the very best in yourself. I think that was quite unique. I'm indebted to him for that. Not just as a hockey player. I remember in his white, do you remember, David, always in a white jumper at left full back, encouraging us to play in the wet, windy, damp, daggy conditions most of the time. But he had that aura, which I think was very special.
Thank you very much, Melvin.
Andrew,
David,
just briefly on
yeah.
David. One of the great impressions I had of Declan Budd was when you'd go out to play a game in Treerock on London Bridge Road. It was nearly always Declan, I can recollect, that would be just finishing marking the pitch. And the other thing about that great Treerock Rovers team of the 60s, I mentioned it earlier about losing the Mills final to them, and Paddy Neville telling me, don't worry about John Lavin, just cut out the pass to him, and I can see why. But that was an exceptional Treerock Rovers team, and people like, wouldn't forget the Mike Varians, the Horton Fryers, the David Pickett's, and all these people. I played against them all. But there was one man who was never an international in all those years, and I don't think they needed him, was Des Cashel, the goalkeeper, who died quite young out playing against Weston. And Des was the goalkeeper on that great Rovers team. But so he was so good, he rarely ever got shots. And I'll finish off, we beat them in 1965, 1-0 in the league in Portran. We were the only team to beat them in that season. In the same year of the same season, they beat us 10-2 in the Mills Cup in London Bridge Road. The following week, we played them in the Irish Senior Cup first round, and we beat them 2-1. Every game of hockey is different. Thanks for that, Andy.
Interrupt.
Thank you very much, David.
Interrupt. The Portran pitch gave them at least a 3-goal lead. It was a hillock of slide. I think they ploughed it before they rolled it. They didn't bother to roll it. They just ploughed it.
They had the best tea and biscuits afterwards.
They did. Fair enough. Fair due.
Andrew, before you go, can I thank Percy for that fantastic evocation of Neville, Paddy Neville. I mean, they're absolutely wonderful, wonderful. I mean, I was a kid at the time, but I remember his name so well. And when you tell us about how he excelled, not just in hockey, of course, but in cricket and Gaelic and football and so on, the man was, and handball. Let's not forget the skills of handball. What a sportsman that man was.
He was.
Yeah. Thank you,
gentlemen.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David, for talking about Three Rock first 11 when it was so strong. But the strength of Three Rock went down to the lower teams. David scored a hat trick in 3 consecutive matches. Isn't that right, David? Four consecutive matches. Three Rock, a bit like the Leinster team. We could put out 4 or 5 teams. Now, I'm going to see if I can bring up Hugh Fitszimons talking about Bennie.
Bennie Atkinson.
Ah, right.
On this subject, which is a very
can you hear it?
Subject to speak about our heroes, and certainly on the hockey front, I have a big hero in Bennie Atkinson from Pembroke Wanderers. So just before I get into Bennie, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'd never played hockey until I was asked to play in UCD, and I was delighted to try it because I'd been badly broken up in rugby, and I was pretty sore and bad back, the usual injuries you get when you're playing that game. So, long story short, I joined UCD, and the 3 teams, they weren't a senior club at the time, they were a junior club, and we played on the old pitch, which was beside the old house in UCD with the surrounding athletics track. I'm sure some of you played there at some stage. However, after 6 or maybe 8 games, I was getting a little frustrated, simply because I had played all my sports using a racket of some sort, backhanded, cricket, hurling and golf. So I'm a left-hander basically, although I'm a right-handed person, but I swim left-handed. So I found it frustrating that I couldn't coordinate the ball and the hockey stick play as a right-hander, which you obviously have to be when you're playing hockey. So I went to the guy who had asked me to play, and I said, look, I'm a bit frustrated. I'm not really enjoying it. He said, do you want to try goalkeeper? And I said, sure, no problem. So starting goal, and played a couple of games, really enjoyed it. And within probably a month or 6 weeks, I was on the first team in UCD and played right through that season and played in the Mauritius Cup. And I really enjoyed it. Great team sport, loved it. Played another season with them and played Mauritius Cup again, and again really enjoyed it. At the end of the second season then, I was asked by a couple of guys that played in Pembroke Wanderers. Mick O'Brien would be one of them, the umpire, and played a lot with Pembroke over the years. Michael O'Brien asked me would I be interested in joining? I said, I'd love to, because I wanted to play with a senior club. So I started on the fourth team in Pembroke Wanderers, probably around 1972, and I played a few games with them. And one day after a game, this gentleman came up to me called Bennie Atkinson, and he said, Hugh, he said, I like your style of goalkeeping. And I said, well, thanks very much. I said, did you ever get any coaching? And I said, no. I said, I just fell into hockey by accident, and I ended up in goal by accident. So, and he said, look, he said, I'm going to give you some extra coaching if you're interested. I said, God, I'd love that. So anyway, he took me aside, brought me out onto the, we didn't have obviously Astro and Serpentine at the time. So he brought me out, and he would bring a few players out hitting balls at me, giving me coaching lessons on what to do, what way to save the ball, what way to kick it. Now I had natural instincts from having played a lot of soccer. And fortunately for me, I could kick with both my left foot and my right foot, which as it turned out was a great asset playing hockey. So he also gave me a fabulous book which had been produced by a famous Irish goalkeeper, Harry Cahill, who I'm sure you're all familiar with. And I diligently read that and went back and did more lessons and more lessons. And to cut a long story short, anyway, that season I ended up getting on the seconds in Pembroke Wanderers, and I was delighted with myself. So Pembroke that year actually won the Irish Senior Cup, and Wesley Griffith was the keeper. We all know Wesley. He comes along to our dinners or our lunches, and Wesley was very established, a very good sound keeper, and I was happy with that. I knew I was understudy to him, but it would be hard to break into the first team. So that summer I was playing cricket, and I came across Joey O'Mara. He met me and introduced himself, and he obviously had seen me play or heard about me. So he very kindly asked me, would I be interested in joining Railway, because their number one keeper had emigrated to Australia, a chap called Tony Dodd. And I said, look, I said, I better talk to the guys at Pembroke, because it's not fair to walk out on them after a season. And I've said I've been very well looked after, very well coached by a number of players, but particularly Bennie Atkinson. So Charlie Sutherland was the incoming captain. I spoke with Charlie, and he said, look, Hugh, it's entirely your decision. So I went back to Joey and I said, look, Joey, if you give me 10 games in the first team, I can't make it, you can drop me, but I want to guarantee 10 games. So anyway, that's exactly what happened. And I ended up playing on the first team in Railway, and spent many great seasons there playing against all you guys. And obviously some of you guys were on my own team in Railway Union. So just one story which I think you'd all be interested in. My first ever senior game was that season I joined Railway Union, which I think was 73. And we played on the lovely grass pitch in London Bridge Road. And I think Andrew might have been playing at the time. I recall, I'm fairly sure he was. I can't recall who was keeper, but I think it might have been Peter or Trevor were in goal, but I'm not 100% sure which of them. So anyway, Dermot Ashmore, who also comes to our luncheon, very kindly did a huge write-up on me in the Irish Times that Wednesday and said, new Railway keeper, Fitszimons starting against Tree Rock Rovers tonight. So 10 minutes into the game, who arrives into the circle coming straight at me but one Derek Hennessy. Now, I'd heard of Derek. I'd never met him in my life before, never played against him. And Derek came in and hit this ball as hard as I've ever seen a ball hit. Unfortunately for me, it went flying over my head and over the bar. And obviously in those days, when you didn't wear helmets, it was a bit scary, but at the same time, I was happy that it didn't actually hit me. So later in the bar, I was in having a drink, as we always did in those days. Very social the game was, which I also enjoyed about hockey. Derek came over, and as I said, I think it was either Peter or Trevor I was chatting to. One of them said to him anyway, Derek, you missed a very easy chance after 10 minutes against that guy Fitszimons. Guess this keeper here, why did you hammer it over the bar? And he said, well, I wasn't intentionally trying to hammer it over the bar. He said, but I just wanted to show him what first team hockey was like. So I learned a big lesson that day. And but just going back to Bennie, I don't think I would have got where I was in hockey without Bennie's instruction. He's very kind-natured generosity in giving me extra time. And in my eyes, he was my hero in hockey, and I'm indebted to him for my hockey life and for all the great friends I met throughout the years. So have a great Christmas, guys, and thank you, Andy, for inviting me. Look forward to next year's luncheon, and hopefully we'll all be well, and it'll be a COVID-free environment. Thank you very much.
There was a cup named for Bennie in juvenile hockey.
Yep.
Right.
The Bennie Atkinson's Cup is for underage hockey.
Good stuff.
That presentation by Hugh Fitszimons was recorded last week. He's at a family meal this evening in a nice Dublin restaurant. So he sends his apologies. I think that brings our Zoom to an end, gentlemen. And I thank you for your patience over an extended period.